fix all this, go to Chapter 6 in Canvas, the Chapter 6 zip folder, download it and unzip it to your desktop. That's probably the best place, unless your computer runs really fast. Put it wherever you want or where you're normally used to working with it. There you're going to open the file, so you do File, Open Folder. So File, Open Folder, you'll navigate to where you have it located on your computer. You'll open the folder and it will look like this. We're going to come to this gray area here, and we are just going to add the root folder into Chapter 6, which you can drag and drop and move it anywhere. You can put it to your desktop or anywhere else you want after we're done here, but we're going to just start with in Chapter 6 and work with it this way. So the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to right click with our mouse in a gray area here, and we are going to create a new website root folder. And always puppies, you guys are getting used to me and my puppies, right? So it's going to be a puppy's website because this is about me. This is a website about me. So this is an actual root folder that I have created. If I double click or open it, there's nothing in it. So what I'm going to do is right click and put in a new folder. And the folder is going to be the CSS folder. And then I'm going to also be in here, do another folder, and I also want this at the root level. You can tell they're at the root level because it just goes here. They're at the root level. I'm going to put in an images folder. So a lot of times we use the starters folder when we create our root folders for our websites. Then inside here, we are going to create the new file. And our first file that you're going to create is going to be your index.html file, and we are going to start with our doc type. So exclamation doc type, and it is an HTML5 file, so just all you need is the HTML. The next thing we're going to do is put in your HTML element or tag. Inside that, you are going to put in your head tag. And after that, you are going to put in your body tag. Inside the head tag, there are three things that we always start with. The first is the meta character set of UTF-8. So we're going to do meta character set. This is all code hinting, so this makes life easier for you. So definitely make sure you have the file saved as an HTML file because it does give you this code hinting as you're going through. The next thing we're going to do is put in the meta that I require. So this authors your work. Like I said, if you wrote or painted something, you would want somebody to know you did it. So that's the same thing we're doing here. So the name equal, and you want to make sure you select author, and then you want to put in the content, and the content is your name, so put in your name, don't put in Mary White, please. So definitely make sure you don't put in my name because you're authoring your own work. And then the last thing that we always put in is the title, and this is where the information that shows up in the tag of every browser. So this is the tag information. The four elements that I need you to create inside each of your pages. The first element that you need to put in is the header element. The header will probably have an H1 that tells me the topic that you're going to be talking about. The next is the nav. This is where you're going to have all the links from the 3 pages that you're going to create. After the nav is going to be the main. This is the main content area. This will include all of your paragraphs, all your H2s as you outline your content, and your images that you create. So that will all be created in there. And then the last element that you will have to have for each of your pages is a footer. So these are required elements that you have to have for each of your pages. The other thing that I will probably show you about this when we're done with chapter 6 is how to wrap these elements in a div tag so that you can have a container or a wrapper that will allow you to center. So don't go ahead and start writing your code yet until you're done with the chapter 6, but at least you know you have the initial folder here. Whatever your topic is, you can go ahead and create that, and you're ready to start for your topic 1. We are going to start. The very first thing we're going to do is I have the chapter 6 folder unzipped on my desktop. So I'm going to do chapter 5 is where we were before. So we're going to go to chapter 6. So I'm going to do file and I'm going to open folder. I have to go to my desktop. So definitely you guys probably don't have as messy of a desktop as I do, but find your chapter 6 folder. Find the files that you want. So I'm just going to select the chapter 6, select the folder. When we open it, I am going to do the view with no split. That is something, if you haven't realized, that you can do the view and you can do split and have 2 panes open at the same time. Or you can do a horizontal split where they're on top and bottom, and you can put multiple files. This works really well when you're working on CSS and HTML at the same time. So if this is a CSS external file and then this is your HTML file, you can actually see your selectors and things. So it's kind of nice that way. So I'm going to do no split at this time. What we want to do is we're going to go to the hands-on practice 6.1, and we are going to start with creating a folder, and this is going to be the coffee CH or chapter 6 folder. This is a root folder that we're going to place in here, just like I created the puppies folder earlier. So I'm going to come here, do new folder, and this folder is going to be coffee Ch6, and we are going to see that folder, this is a website folder now, and inside that folder I am going to put in a new folder, and it's going to be my images folder. Just so you get used to using images. And then inside that folder I am going to save starters 1. So I'm going to open up starters 1 so that it shows here, and then I'm going to do file save as, and I'm going to find the folder I want it to be saved in. So I'm going to save it at the root level of this folder, not in the images folder, and I'm going to just save. And so when I come here, you can see I have a starters 1 still at the root level of the whole chapter 6 folder, and it's also in my website folder for the coffee 6. So we want to be using this starters folder to be working with. So if you're not sure, close the one that's there, come down to your coffee chapter 6 folder and click on that. In here, we are going to change the width and the min width of the element of the body, and we are going to change the height and the line height of the H1 element. So we have our body element right here, and we are going to put in the width of 80%. So this is 80% of the browser window. So we're going to put in 80%. And then we're going to put in a min width. So this saying we don't want it to be any smaller than this width. And we're going to say we're going to put in a static number of 750 pixels. So this is going to just say the whole body of the website cannot at this point get smaller than 750 pixels. Even if the browser window or the viewport gets smaller, we don't want our website page to get smaller. So we're going to save this, Control S or File Save. That will save it. We are doing embedded styles, so this is in the head part of your document. And then we're going to add, we can look and see what this looks like now in the browser. Remember, my viewport is 150%, so it does look a little different than your viewport. The other thing I can tell right now is I'm missing my image. So I definitely have to reset my image because they had the image at the root level. So I'm going to find out where the image is right here, and it's that coffee logo that, oh, I don't think I brought the coffee logo over. So we definitely need to bring that coffee logo over from the starters folder. So we're going to drag that from the starters into our image folder, and we are going to just change this path to be images and coffee logo. If I save this and then look at it again, we should see that image there too. And the image will be cut off because the image is bigger than the amount of space that we're providing. So we're going to have to set up some height here, or a line height. And this looks kind of squished too, so we're going to fix that. To do that, we're going to go over to our H1, and we are going to put in a height of 150 pixels. So we're just kind of, our image should go about that size. Pixels are very static measurements. EMs and percents work with the browser and give you a percentage based on it. The line height, this is going to be the line height, and this is going to be the height around our content, and the content is the text that we have here. And we're going to set that up to 220%. We're going to save that. We're going to view that in a browser. And there we go. We have that first changes done to, we did the width and the min width, so that now as we make the browser smaller, it won't get any smaller than 750 pixels. The page width will be 80% of the browser window if the browser window is bigger than 750 pixels. If the browser window gets smaller than 750 pixels, the browser window will overlay the content. The line height and the height allows us to see the logo, and we won't overlay that information. Okay, so that is the first hands-on practice. The next thing we're going to do is talk about the box model. The box model is where you can actually look at the content. Content can be your text, it can be an image, it can be video. Content is anything that you put inside of two tags. So here, this is content. The coffee house is content. It's text content. The H1 is content of the header. The nav, these anchors are content of the nav, but inside the anchors, the home is content. So that's what I'm talking about, content. The box model says that most of the elements that we put on a page are put in a box format, or similar to a box format. If you look at page 182, figure 6.6, it has, if you look in your book, figure 6.6 shows you the box model, and the content, like I said, is the information that you put between two tags or is nested in tags that are on your page. The padding is just as if you would be putting padding around something very delicate. You would put peanuts, or you'd put foam padding or something around it to protect it from the other things that are going to be pushed up against it. So if this is a box, and I always like to think about, I'm a kind of visual person, and I like to think about it as if I'm packing a box in a truck to move. And the content is whatever I put in the box, a vase or something very delicate. Padding allows me to have space around that protects it. The border would actually be the actual box itself. And you can have a border or not have a border, but the margin is the space between the box itself in other boxes, so you can have more than one boxes. As you have seen, we have stacked our boxes so far. We stack our header, nav, main, and footer on top of each other. So we just kind of stack our boxes. So the margin is how much space is between the boxes as we're stacking them on top of each other. We're going to learn how to put boxes next to each other or inside of each other. And so the margin is the space of a box to a box, top or bottom or side by side, or the box to the browser. Okay, so here on the left right now, this is the margin, and then this would be the browser space that we would be working with. And then here on the right, that could be the browser space if all we have is one box that we're dealing with, instead of having two boxes side by side. And if we had two boxes side by side, it would be this box and then another box sitting next to it, and the margin would be how much space is between one box and another box. So margin is between the browser and another box. Border as if it is the containing box and how much space or how many pixels or how many EMs you're going to have, and if you want to display the border. The padding is the content plus the area that is protecting the content. So if we put padding in here and we have the content here and we want to put in a nice fun background, we can have the background go all the way out to the content area, which is nice. So that is the box model. The PDF that's out here, and using the H1 as a selector. So the H1 would be the content in here. So if we said mine is my topic is going to be about puppies. So my H1 would be puppies. And if I put in so this is the selector H1, this is the property, and then this is the value. This is a shorthand way to say I'm going to have 0 padding on the top, 0 padding on the right, 0 padding on the bottom, and 0 padding on the left. So for all 4, top, right, bottom, left, I'm going to set that up to 0. Now I can put in the property of padding top, padding right, padding left, and padding bottom, and I could actually put in padding top 0, padding right 0, padding left 0, padding bottom 0. But this is a little shorthand that allows me to do all 4 of those in this one single statement. So that being said, if you have a selector with H1 and then you have the property of padding, so it's this space around here around the content, and I have 20 pixels and 10 pixels. What that means is the 20 pixels is for the top and the bottom padding, and the 10 pixels is for the right and left. So it goes top and bottom when you have just 2, and right and left. Okay, so it kind of goes in a clock fashion, so it goes around the clock. So top, right, bottom, left. If I have the selector H1 and padding, it is 10 pixels on the top, 30 pixels on the right and left, and 20 pixels on the bottom. If I do the one with 4, it is the selector of H1, property of padding, 20 on the top, 30 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 30 on the left. So that's what the 4 is. So each of these has a different way you read the syntax of it, and it makes life a little easier and makes coding a little faster. But you can do the longhand and type each of these out. So I could actually have H1 padding top of 20 pixels, H1 padding right 30 pixels, H1 padding bottom 0 pixels, H1 padding left 30 pixels. So just remember it goes in a clockwise fashion as you're reading these. So it's always top, right, bottom, left. No commas between them, just spaces between each of them. If it's the same distance, you can put in 1. If it's the same distance on the top and bottom, you can put in, and left and right, you can put in 2. There's this website, Learn Layout. I love for you guys to go here and learn more about the box model. This shows you, there was a div for div class of simple and a div class of fancy. Each of these shows you with the classes. Classes are always prefixed with a period, and this shows you how the styling is set up for them with the margins. So here a width is set up of 500 pixels for the simple, and it has a margin of 20 pixels on the top and bottom, and it's auto on the left and right, so it's going to center it in the browser. On the fancy, it has a width of 500 pixels, and it has a margin of 20 pixels on the top and bottom, and it has 50 pixels of padding around the whole thing. So it has 50 pixels. So this one didn't have any padding around it. This one does, the fancy one does. So it makes it bigger, and then the border is 10 pixels around the whole thing. So it takes up more pixels. So if you think about it, on the top and bottom of this 500 box, we're making it bigger, and we're giving us 50 pixels above the content and 50 pixels below and 50 pixels on the right and 50 pixels on the left. But if we have a width of 500, our box is really getting, with the padding, it's the 50 plus the left and right. So that's 600 pixels plus 10 pixels of border on the left and right. So the width gets even bigger than 600 pixels. It gets to be 620 pixels wide, where this one was just had a margin of 20 pixels. So it was just the space around it. And this one is the space inside it and actually defining the border. Okay, we're back in brackets, and we're going to go to the box.html here at the root level of chapter 6. We'll look at this, and we're going to just kind of look and see what we've got going on here. We have the body, which is the box around the whole page. Then we have an H1 box and the box right here, the element box. If we look here, we have the background is white and the font size is larger, so they're using the words instead of pixels or EMs. Then the H1, which is this, the selector for the H1, has a background color. I'm trying to roll over it. It looks kind of a light blue. And then a border of solid. So this is the border. It is the width of the border. It's 1 pixel all the way around, top, bottom, right, left. This one, it's saying it's solid. So there's other options that we can use. We're saying that it's black and that we have 20 pixels of padding around this content. Okay, then we have this box element, or this box ID. IDs are prefixed with a hashtag, a background color of this more sky blue, and then a border of 5 pixels solid and black. So we're going to have 2 boxes. They're going to be sitting on top of each other. So we're going to look at this. And so now here you see we have 20 pixels all the way around this one. This one is sitting right at the edge of the box. We have no padding on this one. This one had 1 pixel of border around it, and this one had, actually I'll bring this down at the bottom. So 1 pixel versus 5 pixels. This one had padding of 20 pixels of padding, so it pushed it away from the edge, and it pushes it away from the border, so it doesn't look like it's just sitting on the edge. And so this is how the box model works. The margin, this is the margin between the browser window. This is the margin between the 2 boxes. So we have margin via the boxes themselves, how they relate to each other, and how they relate to the browser window. So as you can see, I can make this bigger and smaller, and the box still floats. So margin, border, padding, content. Padding, border, margin. Margin, border, no padding, content, border, and then this would be the margins on the right and left. The example that we were looking at. And then we're going to go on down. And so this is the shorthand. It talks about the shorthand and how all of that works. Always top, right, bottom, left, clockwise. And then you can actually have auto as an option for any of your margins. You can put in pixels, you can put EMs or percents. It's talking all about that. And then here we're going to open up the box2.html in chapter 6, and we're going to see this. So we're going to go to box 2. So here we have the body, that is the whole page, the H1 and the div. This is the box model. The only thing that is different is that we are setting up some left padding on the H1, and we are setting up a left margin on the box. So here's the H1 and here's the box. Let's go look at it. And so we have padding of 60 pixels here, and we have margin of 60 pixels here. So they're basically showing us that. They're showing inside the second box element here, which is the box. We're going to have 5 on the top and bottom of padding and 10 pixels on the left and right, where this has 60 pixels here of padding on padding left. So you can just set up one of the elements if that's all you need to do. Okay, so in the book, we're going to go through the borders. And so you can use the border shorthand that actually gives you the border width, border style, and border color. And this would be the element that you would be setting up, or this would be the rule. It would be border. It would give you 1 pixel solid and black right there. So all zeros, the hexadecimal of zeros is black. You also have the availability to do border bottom, border left, border right, border top, border width, border style. We have all of these available. The width can be in pixels or EMs or thin, medium, thick. The border color can be any color value that you're using, hexadecimal or RGB. The styles can be none, inset, outset, double, groove. I'm going to see if I can find this. Oh, here it is. It's right here. So here are the styles it's showing you. So here's some of the inset, outset, the double. Sometimes these don't work. Like if you have like just a black color, you really don't see them as well. The ridge, sometimes they work and look really good with the browser. Sometimes you can't see them. The dash, the dotted. So those are the border styles. So it's usually you're going to use this option here where you use the property border. You put the amount of pixels you want, and then you select your style. And that's what these are, the style. So these are all the styles that are available. So with this one, we're going to use box2.html from chapter 6. We're going to configure the H1 to display a 3-pixel rigid bottom border. So we're going to give it a border on the bottom of this H1. So we're going to come here and create a border bottom. We're not going to have a border all the way around, just a border bottom. And it's going to be 3 pixels. The style is going to be rigid and it's going to be black. So border, and it's going to code hint here for us. So I'm going to do border bottom. I'm going to do 3 pixels. Yeah, spelling. We want rigid, and then we want it to be this dark gray, which is 330000 semicolon. Okay, so that is the rule we're creating for the bottom. So let's look at that real quick. So that's what we did. We just created the border on the bottom. The next thing we're going to do is put a border around this whole element. And we're going to, instead of just saying border bottom, we're going to say border, and it's going to put the border on all four sides. So we're going to come to the box, and we're going to put in a border. And we're going to put in 1 pixel. It's going to have a style of solid, and it's going to be black. And so that's 3 zeros or 6 zeros will do that for you. Go ahead and save that. We're going to review it. We're going to refresh this, and now we have this 1 pixel border all the way around our box. The next CSS rounded corners. To do that, you use a border radius. So you can have a border radius on just a specific corner, or you can have it on all the corners. This works out really nice. It's kind of fun to play with. We're going to just put a border radius on our box here. So we're going to come down to the box, and we're going to put a border radius first on it. So if you do border dash radius, so this is the property, border radius. This can be set up in pixels. If we put in 90 pixels, it's going to give us really rounded, almost circle type borders. I'm going to set it to really small real quick so that you guys can see. It's small. I'm going to save that. Come back, look at it, refresh it. And as you can see, I have a very small rounded corner here. If I create that, let's see if I can move this over. If I create this from 5 pixels to 90 pixels, it's going to give me a more round or circular look to the corners. And you can see that here. So it almost gives me a button-like feel for this area here. So you can do that on some of your things that you're working with. So that is the border radius. You can set up the border radiuses to be only to specific parts of the box. So if I want it to be top left, and I'm going to set that to be 15. And then I'm going to copy that again. And I'm going to paste that. And then I'm going to say I want it to be bottom left. So just one side of the box. I want to have the border radius to be 15 pixels. If I save this, always save when you do embedded styles. Sometimes the browsers will pick it up, sometimes they won't. But as you can see, now it will just make the change on one side. The other side is perpendicular. These are 90-degree angles. This has a border radius on both of these, giving me a feel that I'm trying to make a change or make a different look here. You can also do like bubble-like looks where you can do the top right corner border radius, and then this kind of looks like a chat bubble. Now we're going to do hands-on practice 6.3 in the book. We're going to create a folder called Bistro Chapter 6 or Ch6. So we're going to create a folder, and it's going to be the Bistro Chapter 6. We're going to pull in the starters too. So what we can do is we can select the starters. We can do File, Save As. And this is where we just come to our Bistro Chapter 6. and say open and save. And so when we come up here to our Bistro Chapter 6, we should see the Starters 2 folder in there. So in this folder, like I said, I'm just getting you guys used to creating image folders. We're going to do right click and do new folder. And we're going to call it images or assets, whatever you want to call it. That's your choice. I usually go with images. And then we're going to go to the starters folder and we're going to grab a couple images to go into this. The first image is going to be the background image. So this is the it should be the background that we're using here. So this background image here. So we're going to grab that image and you can just drag and drop it. So you click on it and you can see that I can drag and drop it into the images folder. And then the lighthouse logo. So if you click on it, you can actually see it. And I'm going to drag and drop that. I'm going to go back to my starters 2. Now, if I look at this, the links to the images will be broken, so we have to fix those again. So now if you look here, we don't have the background showing here, so we have to fix that image. The path isn't at the root level in this folder where it was initially. It's in the images, so we have to say go to the image folder and find the background. So we're going to come here and find out where the image is, and it's right here at the body. So the background is in the images folder, and that's what we're going to use. And then we're going to create an H1, and we're going to use the lighthouse logo and put rounded corners on that. And I usually like to go body and then H1 and then H2 and footer. I like to just have them flow instead of just putting it after the footer. Honestly, CSS will work any way you put the code, but it reads from top to bottom, so I like to be organized and I like to put the next selector in order. So H1 I always feel like comes before H2. So I'm going to start there. We're going to put in a background image. I wanted to do URL. So you come to the URL and select that images folder here, and then we're going to do the lighthouse. So this is our path, and you can roll over it and you can see the path now. That is one way to tell that you're doing this correctly. The next thing we're going to do, so we have that in, that's the first rule for your H1. We're going to put in another rule that says we don't want that background to repeat down the page. So we're going to do background repeat. You can just come here, and once you get this, you can scroll down and find the background repeat and select the no repeat. So we selected the image with the URL. Now we're saying we only want the image to display once, and that's what the background repeat does for us. If you don't put that in there, it will try to repeat the background multiple times down the page based on how much space you have. So then I'm going to put in a height of 100 pixels, and that is a rule. And we're going to put in a width of 700 pixels. So you can see width is the third one down here, so I'm going to select that, 700 pixels, and that is a rule. And we're going to do a font size. This is the font size for the H1. So if you come down here, Lighthouse Bistro is the text that's going to be showing on top of this image. So we're going to do font size, and that is going to be 3 EMs. An EM is about 16 pixels, so if you just multiply 16 times 3, that's about what the size should be. It's something to think about. Then we're going to do the padding. We talked about our box model, and we're going to give it a left padding because we have that image of the lighthouse on the left, and if we have the text writing over that lighthouse, it's just not going to look good. So we're going to put the padding left, and we're going to say that's 150 pixels. And then we're going to have padding top, so we're going to push the text down about 30 pixels. So padding top and 30 pixels. We're going to now put in the last rule that is going to give us rounded corners on all the edges of the image. Just kind of softens the image, doesn't just look square and boxy. We're going to give it a border radius of 15 pixels. Sorry. Do not know why. Trying to enunciate here. Okay, so this is the rule that we have. You guys, if you have Beautify, you can actually beautify your code and you can actually see each of these selectors. And then this is what we just typed in, all of this. Okay, I'll let this sit here for a second and save. Let's look at it. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we'll look at it, and it looks huge over here. But you can see that we've put this in. We have the gradient background. We've got the rounded corners. This is the padding that keeps these words from overlaying this image here. This is 700 pixels, but my screen size is 150%, so it looks a little bit bigger than what you'll probably see on your screen. Okay, something to look at here is our 750 pixels now is trying to stay at the left margin here, and that is because everything that is built in a web browser starts here at 00 coordinates at the very top of the browser, and it tries to keep everything over here to the left. So what we're going to do is we're going to center all of this content by putting a wrapper around it. So we're going to put a wrapper structure around it. So all of this will be nested, or all of this structure code will be nested in a div called wrapper. That wrapper, or you can call it wrapper or container, will allow us to put in how wide this information should be in the browser window, and then how much space we should have on the left and right of it. And so we'll center it in the browser window. So to do that, we're going to come over here and create another folder, and it's going to be called Center Ch6 or Chapter 6. So come over here, right click, do New Folder, and we're going to call it Center Ch6. So Chapter 6, we're going to go to the 6.3 folder, and we're going to grab everything out of that folder and put it into this folder. So you can grab each of these things. I do want you to do the same thing as we did before, is you'll open up this one, you create a new folder, call it assets or images, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it images. Just organize your websites. This is a website folder now, and I'm going to grab this image and drag and drop it here, and I'm going to grab the background and drag and drop it here. I can grab the index file, but I tend to like to just do file save, so file save as, and I'm going to save that into, scroll down here, into the center Ch6. So this is the root folder for the new website that we're going to create, and I'm going to save, and so it will save a copy here at the root level. I'm going to close this one up, and I'm going to close this one up. So now we have all of these. We'll look at the index real quick here. Oops. So I'm going to close this starter. Again, we look at this, we'll see that our links are saying that they should be at the root level. The path here for the URLs are saying for all of our images they should be at the root level. Because we're organized these into the image folder or images folder, we need to modify those. So we're going to go to images slash, and we're going to go for the lighthouse images. slash. And so this should look a lot like what we just finished with the Lighthouse Bistro. So the Bistro chapter 6. So this and this are going to look a lot the same. So the styles, these are embedded styles. These styles are what are making the look and feel of the website. Now we have to go down into the structure and between the body tags. So inside the body tags, not including the body tags, but inside the body tags, we are going to wrap all the content that's here. So we're going to wrap all of this content that's between the body tags. And to do that, we're going to use our surround option that we have, and we're going to do edit, and we are going to find surround, the surround selection here. And we're going to put in a div with an ID of container. And the ID of container is going to surround all of this content and nest all of this content inside a div container. So we're going to do div ID. So ID is how we're going to define it. And we're going to call it container. Container, wrapper, whatever you want to call it. This word inside the quotation marks is whatever you want to use. I started with wrapper, so I say wrapper all the time, but container works just fine. I know a lot of people go with the container option. So we're going to go ahead and press the enter key, and you will notice that that div opens and closes around all of your content that was inside the body. Okay, so the other thing I like to do is I'm going to come down here to line 40, and I'm going to press my control and my slash key, which is under the question mark, and get a comment, and I'm going to say end container. I do that because if I have multiple divs closing, I know that this div, this one right here, this end of this div is the end of this ID container. So it just helps me when I come back 6 months to a year later to know what this div is. Because if I'm coming down here and looking at the code and I have, let's say, 100 or 300 lines of code, this div may be all the way up at line 25, and this closing div may be down 300 lines. If I don't have this comment here, it doesn't allow me to know where this information is, but this does. Okay, so now we're going to go back up here. Now, body is the global styles that we have. We have a background image, we have the fonts, and then right underneath that, we're going to put in our ID of container. So when we put an ID in, okay, we put the structure in this way, but when we put it in as a selector, we put in the hashtag and container, and you put in the opening and closing brackets. Now, if you did what I did and spelled it in, you have to spell it the same way, because if you don't, it won't work. Creative spelling doesn't do you any good here. So this, the way you spell this and the way this is spelled have to be exactly the same. So ID of container, and now we're going to do some things. The very first thing we have to do is we're going to change the background color so that we can just see where the container is affecting everything. So we're going to put in background color, and we're going to just, it's a hashtag, and white is Fs, 3 Fs or 5 Fs, sorry, 3 Fs or 6 Fs. So I'm going to put in, can be upper or lowercase, doesn't really matter. Then we're going to do a padding all the way around the content. So this will allow us to have some breathing room around that container or inside the container. So I'm going to do padding, and it's going to be 2EM. So we just get a little breathing room all the way around the whole container. And then, not EMD, sorry, EM. So that gives us the breathing room. Then we're going to use a width, and a lot of times people forget to put the width in. but I'm going to put in width, and this is the width of what it will be displayed in the browser window, and we're going to say it's going to be displayed 80% of the browser window. Okay, and then we're going to have the margins. So we're going to have margin left is going to be auto, and margin right is going to be auto. So that will try to center it in the browser window. The other thing we're going to do is say a min width of 800 pixels. So we don't want it to get any smaller than 800 pixels. Okay, I'm going to put this. So now this should center your content within the browser window. As you make the browser bigger, you will see that it centers it and takes 80%. If you make the browser smaller than 800 pixels, it will overlay it. I'm going to check something here. See if this works. Okay, so here, I don't know if you can see this really well, but this allows us to see that it's centered it in the browser window. I'm going to try to make my browser a little smaller so you can see it. It's just kind of hard to see what's going on here. Fun, fun. Okay, so here my browser is a little smaller. This is 80%. It's taking 80% of the browser window, and it is centering my content. This white box is the container. This background is the body, okay? And then everything else inside it is nested. We did centering the content last. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to use the box shadow and text shadows around our content, and you can use the same folder that we were using, the centering one. If you don't want to use the same centering one, you can go up to Ch6 and move your images and do all that fun stuff again. But since we already have it already done with the centering one, and we're just going to continue on and just make some modifications to this, we're going to use this one. The book has you go use C6.4. But center, we're just going to go ahead and add our shadows to your center, and you will be able to see how we can continue to modify your website. So we're going to do a box shadow around the container, and it's going to just kind of make it feel like it's lifting off the page as you give it a shadow. We're going to put a text shadow on the properties, of your H1s and your H2s. So when you add shadow properties, you put in the horizontal offset. So going horizontally across the page, you put in how many pixels you want that offset to be. Then the next option you put in is a vertical offset. Then from there you put in a blur radius, and then a spread, and then a color. So you can have 5 options. Mostly people use the 4, and they have the X and the Y offset, so horizontally and vertically, and then they have the blur, and then they have a color. So that's what people normally do, but you do have the spread distance, so how far you want the blur to go. You have that option also. All of that is on page 192 in the book, where it talks about the offsets. And box shadows and text shadows kind of work the same way in how you set them up. So we're going to come here to the container, and we are going to put in another rule, and this is going to be box shadow. and we are going to put in the first offset is going to be 5 pixels, and this is the X, okay, and then the Y is going to be 5 pixels, and then the blur is going to be 5 pixels. Then I'm going to put in a color, and this is going to be a hexadecimal color, and it's going to be 1E, 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 and it's kind of a dark gray, um, almost feels black to me when you look at it. So if you want to go ahead and save that, these are embedded styles, so this is the file that has the structure down here. So these are embedded styles. Let's go ahead and look at this again. And you will actually see around the edges here, we have this nice box shadow around the container because we put this in here. Okay, so I'm going to pull that off the screen. And so now what we're going to do on H1 and H2, we're going to put on text shadows. Okay, text shadows are kind of a double-edged sword. You have to be really careful with them because they can make readability really hard if you give yourself an offset that makes the letters blur into the next letter. So you have to be very careful using them. They can look really nice, or they can make readability hard. I'm going to bring this back over here. We're going to put a text shadow on our H1, and we're going to put text shadows on our H2. I'm going to go ahead and play with these. On our H1, it is text shadow now, not text box. I'm sorry, it is, yeah, text shadow, and not text box like we used when we were doing it on the before. Again, it has the 4 values, and it's going to be 3 pixels, 3 pixels. Having fun writing my pixels there. 3 pixels, and then we want to have our color, and this is going to be the hexadecimal of 6-7, 6-7, 6-7. Just a lighter color. It does make that H1 pop a little bit. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put the text shadow in on your H2. And this is going to be 1 pixel, 1 pixel. And on this one, we're not going to have a blur, so they put in 0 for blur. You don't even have to put that in if you don't want to. If you don't put it in, it will assume there's no blur. And then CCC. So that value, the third and fourth value there are optional. I don't know, like I said, it definitely does make a difference, and you can actually see a difference where there's this light gray here at the bottom without any blur. It's almost like you repeated the lettering, but you have to be aware. Now this one you can actually see where we have it, and it's offset, and there is some blur of the color behind the Lighthouse Bistro, and you can kind of see how it negates the space between the letters and how that could cause problems with readability. So you have to be very aware. Okay, so now we're going to talk about background clipping and background origin, and how they work and how it modifies and makes things move around, or the pictures move, or how they fill the boxes that we create. There is a folder called Clip, and we're going to open up that folder and look at the index in Clip. So if you look at the index in Clip, it will have 3 boxes. And when you look at these 3 boxes, this is the first one where it has, I'm going to try to get this so you can actually see this. This has the background clip, and it has contain box. So this is the contain box before you hit your padding. So here we have 20 pixels of padding between the edge and the border. And so you're containing the image inside the contain box, okay? And the padding's here. If you look here in the background clipping on this one, it actually fills the padding also with the image. So it fills it more. And then it's really nice that they gave us this one. This one does the border box, and you can actually see because of this dash border, it fills in behind the border, so it goes all the way out. So if you really don't have the physical where you can see the border, it would actually just take up that 10, let's see, 10 pixels for the border. So this is 10 pixels on creating this border. So background clipping, you have to have an image. We're using this island image, and if you actually look at the image, you're not seeing the whole image because the box doesn't have enough space to see the whole image. But as you look here, you can actually see that you see more of the image as we take and make the background clip different. Next one we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the background origin properties and how you will modify where an object is. And so you can have objects in, and we did that with the coffee, where we had a coffee pouring and the logo was at the bottom left hand corner. We had that little coffee cup logo that we moved to the bottom when we were doing that in chapter 5. But the background origin actually allows you to place that. So if you come down here to the origin and look at this, we're actually looking at a similar situation in that we have the background origin and we have the content box. So we're saying stay, sorry, I'm trying to do both of these. We're saying stay inside that box, but then we're saying the background position is the right top. So it's this little flower is going to the right top and it's staying inside the content box. Then if you look, sorry, if we go, so that was the content box. So this is the content box and that goes with this one. Then the padding one, this pushes the image all the way up to the top of the box, but not underneath the border. Then if we say border box, it goes up underneath the border and the origin, the background origin goes up underneath the border. And so you can actually see it clips off part of the flower because the border is overlaying the flower here. So this tells, the background position tells me where the image is going to be. The border box tells me where it's going to lay inside this box level element. And remember, we went back to when we were looking at the box level elements, you have container, padding, border, margins, and that is what we're talking about when we're talking about background origin and where things are sitting. The next property we're going to talk about is background size, and I think this is the one I definitely like the best, is because you can actually make images flow all the way across your viewport or browser window that you're looking in. And so when we talk about viewports, we're talking about phones, tablets, and desktops at this time. Background sizing allows you to set up a height and a width, so you can actually set it up in pixels or percents. You can pair the height and width with auto also. You can use the background sizing to cover, where it stretches the image across the width of the area to completely cover it, or you can use the background sizing that contains the image and it holds it in its aspect ratio. The cover does stretch it, so you have to think about the things that you're putting and you're using with the cover or you're stretching across the background. Some things will work, like a beautiful landscape of mountains will work. But if you take a person's face and you go from where it has a beautiful aspect ratio and you stretch it, that is not going to work. You're going to make that person look out of proportion, or you're only going to get part of the head or part of the hair. It's not really going to work. So you have to be aware of the image you're using and how you're using the background sizing. So That being said, we're going to go into the sizing folder or the size folder here, and we are going to look at the first option here, which is the Sedona, and we are going to just see how this is working. The very first one, let's see if I can move this over a little bit so that you guys can see the images and this together a little bit better. So you can see that they're using this background image here, and the very first one that they're using is they're having the background image, and it doesn't have any background sizing at all. The second one, they're stretching it to be 100% of the width and 100% of the height of this box, and you can see how it stretches. Now it does work, okay, and you do see some distortion, but it's not like as if you stretch somebody's face, okay. Here on this one, it is definitely staying in proportion. So this one where we had the very first is just showing us what the image would look like, and then this one is showing us when it's stretched. Do understand my screen is at 150%, so it does look a lot different than you guys are seeing it. So you can actually see the difference between stretching an image or not stretching an image. That's the first thing we're going to look at. The next thing we're going to look at, let me move this back. Joy, joy. The next thing we're going to look at is using the cover. So we're going to come here, and the cover takes the image and it covers the whole space that we are setting up here. So background sizing is what we're talking about. We're using our image here, so I'm going to come over here and look at the image, and you can actually see what the image looks like at 500 by 500 pixels. So with the cover, it's cutting off part of the image. We looked at the image here, so here we look at the image, and you can see the rocks, the palm trees, the mountain in the background. When I'm using the cover, it fills the space, okay, but it cuts off part of the image. This was a 500 by 500 image. This is not a 500 by 500 space, okay? This is a 200 space, okay? And that's why it's cutting off part of the image. .html. The contain keeps the image its perspective or aspect ratio size, and the aspect ratio size is 500 by 500, but we only have a 200 pixel box, so it's trying to keep its aspect ratio so that you can see the whole image, but it doesn't fill the whole box. So background size here, contain or cover, or at 100%, 100% is what we've been looking at. And that is all in your book, talking about the background size to scale and size an image in your container. Our hands-on practice 6.6, we are going to create a folder called Kayak Chapter 6, and we'll probably be using this on and off. So go ahead, right click, do new folder, and we're going to call this Kayak C6 CH6. So here we have our Kayak folder CH6. We're going to use starter 3. So if you want to select starter and do files, save as, make sure you save it into your Kayak, open and save. When you come up here to your Kayak 6, you should have that starter. We're going to put in a new folder called our images folder, so that we have our images path that we can work with, and we're going to pull in a couple images into this folder. The images we're going to use are going to be the header back blue JPEG and the hero back 2 JPEG. So if you want to go to your starters folder, Hero back blue, and Hero back 2. So we can just pull those into your starters folder. I'm sorry, you can pull those into your images kayak folder. So here's your kayak folder. You're going to pull both of those, the Hero back blue JPEG and the Hero back 2. This is our kayak folder now. When we go to the starters here, we're going to look at this real quick. When I'm looking here, I do notice that this is at the root level again. So my path is at the root level. I am going to modify that, and I'm going to put this in the images, make sure that that is correct. And then I'm going to scroll down, make sure I don't have any other images set up here. Not yet. Doesn't look like we have any other images. So images can be with an IMG in your content, or they can be with a URL up in your styles. So these are embedded styles. Make sure you update your images. I'm going to come here. I'm going to refresh this. And so this is where we're starting right now. This is what it should look like. We are going to change it to look like what is on figure 6.21, and just make some modifications so that it works and fits a little bit better. So the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to center all of our content in the browser window. So let's go down to the browse. Let's go down to the body. So we don't select the body, but we select everything inside the body. So all the structure that's inside the body, we are going to wrap with a container. So to do that, we are going to come here and highlight everything. We are going to do edit. We're going to use the surround, and we're going to use the div again. And the div container is what we're going to do to create that. I like to do structure first. That is just my preference, but if you want to do styles first, that's perfectly fine. The book likes to do styles first. I just like to get my structure done so that as I put the styles in, I can see what's happening. So we're going to do a div ID equals container. And so once you have your opening tag, it will create the closing div tag around all of your structure. So this will nest everything inside this div. So now that we have everything inside this div, I'm going to do beautify so that I can see this a little nicer. The header, navs, main, footer, all inside the div container. And so I want to also put in a comment, so control and the slash with the question mark, and then I'm just going to say end container. Again, this is just my preference so that I know that this div, this closing div, is what it is. Just a good habit. Like I said, you come back 6 months, a year from now, if you don't have comments, sometimes you don't know what this is. So definitely, I'm great at creative spelling, so bear with me. We're going to save that. I'm going to put this back here so that that sits right next to there. We're going to come back up here. Again, body is the first structure element around the whole page. Container is the second element around the whole page. So I'm going to put my ID of container. So as it cascades down, it goes body, container, and then header. I don't want it to go body and then come all the way down here to try to find the container. I want it to actually flow the same way the structure is. So I'm going to do container. And then open and close squiggly brackets, and now we're going to just center this, and we're going to give first for centering anything, you have to give the browser a width and then give it the margin auto left and right. Because if you just give it the margins auto left and right, it doesn't know that it needs to, what size is the object that you're going to be centering it. So the browser has no clue what to do with that auto margin. So you have to always give it a width. So we're going to give it a width of 80%. 80% is just what the book is using. You will be changing this width based on what you decide you want it to be. It doesn't have to be 80%. It can be pixels. It can be EMs. That's up to you. What you want the width of your container to be. So we're going to say it's 80% of the browser window, and then we're going to use the margin, and we're going to do margin left is auto, and we're going to do margin right is auto. I do like to show you the shorthand that I like to use instead of doing this margin left, margin right. I usually type in margin, colon, 0, auto. And then I don't use the margin left and right. And this shorthand allows me to do the same thing. So this allows me to do the same thing that these two lines of code do with a single line of code. This says the top and bottom of the margin is 0 and the left and right are auto. So you can do either one. If you use these two, don't use this one. If you use this one, don't use these two. Okay, so just know you don't have to use all 3 lines. Use whatever you want, but I'm just trying to show you the shorthand and maybe an easier way to do something. From there, we're going to look at your web page, and it should be centered now. Okay, so it should be centered in the browser window because you have that container that wraps all of your content. So now we're going to style this a little bit more. I'm going to actually take this off of here, and I will take this out because the book has it the other way so you're not confused. So we're going to go ahead and put in a background color that makes the background of the container white so we can actually see where the background container is. So we're going to do background color. And we want it to be white. Hexadecimal for white is FFF, 3 Fs, or you can put in 6 Fs. Upper or lowercase doesn't matter. We're going to put in a max or a min width, so we don't want it to go any smaller than 650 pixels. We're going to put in a max width. We don't want it to get any bigger because if it gets bigger, it starts stretching the images and they look unproportionally correct. 1280. With my browser at 150%, I really can't show you what it does with the max width. You should be able to see it on your computer's monitors at home. Then we're going to do a box shadow so that we actually give it a dark shadow, but right now with the body color being what it is right now, we may have to go back and modify that. I think we could go back and, yeah, we're going to go back and modify that to the yellow. So we won't see that change until we modify that to the yellow. So we're going to do a box shadow. Box shadow, like I told you before, has 4 values that we're going to put in: the X, the Y, the blur, and a color. So it's going to be 10 pixels on the X, 10 pixels on the Y, 10 pixels on the blur, and then the color. The color is going to be 333, 333. It's a dark gray, like I said, with this navy blue that we have right now as the black background. We're not going to really be able to see that. We're also going to put in a a border. So we're going to put in a line all the way around the whole thing. And it's going to be 1 pixel solid. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be like a navy blue. And like I said, with our background right now, you're not going to be able to see it. As soon as we change it, you will be able to. So we're going to do border. 1 pixel is how wide it's going to be. The style is going to be solid. And the color is going to be this navy blue. So hashtag 00033. Again, we will look at this real quickly. You will see a little bit, trying to get this so we can see it. So you can see a little bit of the shadow. You can see a little bit of the line, but just not very well. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this body background color from this navy blue to a yellow color. So I'm going to come up here, and if you look here, we have the background color and the font as our global styles. We're going to come here and we're going to change this color to be a yellow. So it's going to be FFFF and DD. So that will give us the yellow color, and that will make this look like this. Okay, so we get this yellow background color instead of that navy blue. There, we're going to change our header, and we're going to give ourselves some height. We're going to give ourselves some padding and some text shadow for the Kayak Door County, and we're going to give the Kayak Door County the text shadow of white instead of black. So we're going to go to the header, not the heading, the header. So this is going to be the header. And if you come down and look here in your structure, you have a header and you have a heading. We are going to modify the header. Okay, so we're going to go up to the header. We're going to give it a height so that we can see more of our image of 80 pixels. It just kind of stretches out that image so that we can see everything, and it gives us more height. We're going to give ourselves padding on the top so that we push our text down by 5 pixels. We're going to give ourselves padding on the left of 2 EMs to push the Kayak Door County over to the right a little bit. And that's going to be 2 EM. And we're going to give our text shadow. So we're going to give that Kayak Door County a text shadow that is 1 pixel, but it's going to be white. And so it just kind of pops out of that navy blue that we have there as the background. So we're going to give text shadow. Of 1 pixel on the X, 1 pixel on the Y, 1 pixel of blur. And you will notice that this does make it a little, I think it makes it a little harder to read with a text shadow on this, but you can tell me what you think when we see each other next. So it does make it pop a little bit, but it does kind of blur the letters together. They're already touching each other. This really makes them feel like they're touching each other more. Like I said, sometimes it works really well. Sometimes you're like, not sure I really like it as much. So you can tell me when you look at it and tell me what you think. The next thing we're going to do is our H1, and we're going to actually have the margin bottom for the H1 so that our nav is touching the H1. And so we just kind of pulled the nav up to the H1. We're going to put the margin bottom of 0. I'm going to scroll down here real quick. Here we have a group selector, or not a, yeah, a group of selectors. It's H1 and H2 and H3. You're going to do that. We can't put the margin on this, so we have to put in another selector of H1 and put in margin 0. And we're going to put in margin bottom 0. because we're going to try to pull up everything, the box underneath it, so that it's touching, so that it's just closer. So you're trying to pull the nav closer to the header. That's what that does with that. And a semicolon to close that rule for the H1. So selector, property, value. Okay, we're going to move on to the nav. In the nav, we're going to have our text align center, and we're going to just move all of our navigation so that all of the elements are centered in the page. So text align, we're going to use the center option, and that should move all of our navigations to the center. So this is kind of where we are now. From there, we're going to go to the main. So come to the main, and we are going to put in the hero back image across the whole back. And here we have the background color of this blue. We're going to come here. We're going to have to put in a background image. So this is styles. We're using the URL. We're going to go to our images, and we're going to use the hero back to image. So as that selects it, you can actually see we roll over that. That's the guide that is using, it looks like the instructor that's the tour guide that was paddling that we used before. And then we're going to put in the background size. And so the background dash size, we're going to put in 100% and 100%. And so that should put in the image and put 100% all the way around. We're going to change our font color to white, and we're going to change our padding all the way around it to 2 EMs. So our color for our font, hashtag, is going to be white. 3 or 6 will work for that hexadecimal. And then the padding all the way around it is going to be 2 EMs. So we're going to save that. We'll refresh this, and you should have something that looks like this now. And as you can see, we changed the color of the text. We have the image that goes all the way around the whole thing. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to style the footer. We are going to give it padding all the way around the footer of 0.8 EM, and that's just going to give us a little breathing room. Right now, if you look at the footer, it kind of feels a little squashed right here, and giving us a little breathing room around this element is going to make it just look nicer. So we're just going to do padding, and we're going to do 0.8 EM. And now if you look at it, it gives you a little breathing room, and it just feels a little more comfortable as you're looking at it. Okay, so we're going to come over here and we're going to create the template file. If you've already pulled it over here, you can skip this part. If you want to watch how to create a template file again, go ahead and watch this. So we're going to come over here. We're going to right click anywhere in the root level folder. We're going to do new file. We're going to call this template.html. We're going to just start coding, and we're going to put in our exclamation point. Doc type tells us that it is going to be an HTML5 file. We're going to come in and put in our HTML. We're going to put in language of English. So the attribute always has the property value in combination, and we get our closing tag. We are going to have a head tag. We're going to have a body tag. And then in the head tag, we are going to put in our two metas that I normally ask you to start with all the time. The first one is name, author your work, please. Definitely you want to take credit for what you do. The next thing you're going to do is put in your meta for your character set. It's UTF-8. That's just saying that it is here in the Americas, Universal Time Format. Then the last thing you always want to do is have the title. This displays in the browser tab. Okay, that's all you need for the template. So go ahead and save that. What we're going to do is we're going to create an opacity HTML. So do File, Save As, take your template file, and we're going to call this opacity.html. Pretty simple here. We're just going to say that this is an opacity example. That will display in the browser inside the body tags. So inside the body tags, opening and closing, nested inside the body tags, we are going to put in a div and an H1. So we're going to put in a div with an ID of content. Again, just kind of best practice, put in a comment that says end of content. I always like to comment when I'm doing my code, because if I don't, and I always forget to do it afterwards. So it's just easier for me to do it while I'm coding. If you want to do it after you're coding, just make sure you do it. You come back later and you'll be sad you haven't done it. We're going to put in fall nature hikes. And so far this is going to look pretty boring. When we look at it, it is going to look like this. Nothing special going on. We're going to include a background image and size that background image via some embedded styles that we are going to have. The image is going to be the fall JPEG from the starters folder. Since it's in the starters folder, if you come over here, you see this fall JPEG. We will just assume, since we're at the root level here with our file, we're going to just use it out of the starters folder. So to do that, inside the head tag, we're going to open up an embedded style sheet with our styles tags. So go ahead and put in styles opening and closing tags. Brackets does help you that way. We're going to style first the content. And we are going to put in the background image. Again, the background image is in the starters folder. And we're going to go to the URL. And then here are all the folders that are here, over here. And we're going to come down to the starters. So we're going to use this scroll bar and come down and find the starters folder, which is right here. There is our fall JPEG, and that will put that image in. Then we're going to make sure that the background repeat is no repeat. The default for background repeat is to repeat, so we're going to do background repeat, no repeat. So I'm just going to scroll down, no repeat. We're going to put in the margins of auto. So we just want it to center around. On the left and right, we're going to give it a width. of 640 pixels, 640 pixels. And we are going to give it a height of 480 pixels. We are going to have a padding on the top of 20 pixels. Go ahead and save that. You should have something that looks similar to this right now. Okay, so we have our image, we have the nature hike, and now we're going to modify the look and feel of the H1. We're going to give it a background for the H1, for the box that contains the H1 of white, but we're going to make the opacities that we can see through it. And we are going to change our font size to 4 EMs. We're going to give us padding all the way around the content, and we're going to give ourselves a left margin of 40 pixels. So we're going to use the selector H1, open and close the squiggly brackets. We're going to start with the background color. We're going to put in a white. So white is 3 or 6. That will give us the white color. Then we're going to give ourselves an opacity. The opacity is in a value that allows you to have opaque, where you see the color completely at 1. And then as you change it to be smaller than 1, you can start having some transparency. So opacity is 0 to 1. 0, you don't see the color at all. 1, it's totally opaque. You see the color totally. In between, you get what is called transparency through the color. So you can actually see through the color and see the object behind the color. So an opacity of 0.6 is halfway between 0 and 1, and so we will be able to see through the color, and we will be able to see the background. Because it's affecting the H1, it's not just the background, it is affecting the text also. So you have to be aware that when you give your H1 an opacity of 0.6, it's going to affect the text and the background. So then we're going to give ourselves a font size of 4 EM, and we're going to give ourselves padding of 10 pixels all the way around, and we're going to give ourselves a margin of 40 pixels on the left. Margin left, and we're going to do 40 pixels, so we're just going to kind of push it over on the left by 40 pixels. So you should have something that looks like this. I'm trying to move it over when you're done. So you can see where we can actually see through the letters, and we can see through the background. And it gives us kind of a nice little header image that maybe you could use on something. So that's how the opacity works. This is opacity, and this is how it works, and it's working on everything that is in the H1. And so we have the background color that we've established, that's white, but we also have this. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the same file. It's already set up. We're just going to strip out some of the styles in it. So we're going to call this one RGBA, and this is red, green, blue, and alpha. Alpha and opacity kind of work the same way. Alpha is the same values. 1, it's totally opaque. You see the color totally. 0, you don't see the color at all. So we're going to grab the opacity, and we're going to do File, Save As. And this is going to be RGBA, RGBA.html. The content's the same. We're just going to change the H1 and how we're going to work with the H1. So come here, strip out all of the styles on the H1. Just delete those. we should be back where it looks like this. So I want us to do is make sure we change this to say RGBA. Always change your title as you create another page. Go ahead and save that. When you come back here, you should be able to refresh it and it should look something like this. This time what we're going to do is we're going to affect the actual text. We're not going to affect the background and the text. And we're going to put in the color, but then we're going to put in the color via the RGBA. So you have kind of a default that will be white if the browser doesn't know how to work with RGBA, but most browsers definitely are working with RGBA without any problem now. So you're going to put in the font color of white. You're going to put in the color, and then it's going to be colon RGBA. RGBA will have, okay, so RGBA and then parentheses. Make sure the parentheses are touching the end of the A. You don't want a space between RGBA. So it shouldn't be RGBA space parentheses. It should be RGBA parentheses all together, one word. And then you will have 4 values. You'll have the 255, comma, 255, comma, 255, comma. So that is the color of white, 255. If you put on all zeros, that would be black. And then every number in between is the rainbow. And then you're going to put in an alpha color, which is going to be 0.8. So you're going to actually have a light, it's going to be see-through, transparent. So it's not going to be completely white, but it's going to have a see-through feel to it. So this is the default. This is the next one. It reads from top to bottom. So this has to be first. This has to be second. Okay? Because it reads from top to bottom as you're going through this. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a font family. The font family is going to be Verdana, comma, Helvetica, and then sans serif. So without ornamentation. So we're going to do that. We're going to put in a font size, a nice big font size of these letters. The font size is going to be 5EM. Again, EMs are about 16 times 5, so that's about what this is going to be. Padding on the right, we're going to give it some padding on the right. And we're going to give it 10 pixels. And we're going to do text align right. So we're going to actually push the content over to the right. So text align, and down arrow to get right. And now it should look something like this. And we got our 10 pixels, so it's not butted up right against the edge of the box. Always put your semicolons and your different rules that you create. HSLA is the next one we're going to do. So we're going to do kind of the similar thing that we did with RGB, but we're going to change the color to yellow, and we're going to change the font family and font size, and we're going to give it padding all the way around. So go ahead, save this, RGBA, do File, Save As, and you're going to do Hue, Saturation, and Lightness, so SLA.html. We're going to come in here and we're going to change Actually, we're going to change all this. We're just going to strip all this out again on our H1. And hue, saturation, and lightness. Hue, saturation, and lightness also has 4 values. And the alpha, hue, saturation, HSLA. And those are all defined here as CSS values. You have where it is on the color wheel, 0 to 360 on the color wheel. If you look at the color wheel on figure 6.2 in the book, on HSLA colors, saturation is a percent. It goes from 100% to 0%. The lightness is also a percentage, and then the alpha also goes from 1 to 0. So this one is going to be a degree on the color wheel, so you'll put it in an actual number. So 0 to 360 is the color wheel that it will be picking from, so that's the hue. The saturation is 0 to 100%. The lightness is 0 to 100%. The alpha is 0 to 1. So hopefully that all makes sense. We're going to move on. We're going to put in the color of the font, and that is going to be color, and this is going to be a yellow, so FF, and then for C's it is a yellow or kind of a pinkish color that they're having us put in. Almost looks like a pink to me. Interesting. Then we're going to put in the hue, saturation, and I'm sorry, we're going to put in color again, colon, and then we're going to do the hue, saturation, lightness, and alpha, and that is going to be with the parentheses sitting next to the hue, saturation, and lightness. No spaces in between HSLA. And we are going to put in 60 degrees on the color wheel. We're going to put a percent of 100 for the saturation, so that's a percent. We're going to have a lightness of 90%, and we're going to have an alpha of 0.8 again. So we want to have, this is where it is on the color wheel. This is where it is on the saturation, 100% saturation. This is the lightness. So if you roll over, you can kind of see what it looks like. We're going to put in a font family again. This one is going to be Georgia, Times New Roman, and Serif. Times New Roman is 3 words, so it has to be in parentheses. And then serif allows for ornamentation of the text. Then we're going to have a font size of 6 EM. Again, EMs are 16 times whatever the EM is, and then padding all the way around of 20 pixels. So you should have something now that looks like this. Maybe not as big as my screen, but it should be pretty similar. So you have used both all the different colors that are out there. I always have every student ask me, why do we go through this? Why do we just not use hexadecimal? Personally, I use hexadecimal. It just is something that I'm always using, and I don't think twice about it. It's easy for me to use. If I want alphas, I use RGBAs. So I use hexadecimal and RGBAs if I need to have some transparency through my colors. Honestly, I don't use hue, saturation, and lightness, but I think we teach you all of these color values out there so that if you run into somebody that has been using them, you understand what's going on. You can see that, oh yes, that's just the color. That's all it is. It's just another way to define a color. So there's more than one way to do something, and that is why we teach it to you, so that you have the experience with doing that. Going to do hands-on exercise 610. This is for gradients and progressive enhancements. So hands-on practice 610. Open up starter 4.4.html. It will look like this in the browser window. So let me just show you what it's going to look like. It's just going to look like this. There's not going to be a whole lot to look at. I'm going to make my browser window kind of small so that I get a lot of content and you can see what's going on as it's happening. So what we're going to do is in the styles, we are going to add some information to the body. We're going to add a background color, and then we're going to add a background image. And in the background image, instead of pulling in an actual image, we're going to pull in a linear gradient or a radial gradient. So we're going to start here with the selector of body, always our global selector, and we're going to put in a background color. And this is going to be a kind of pink color. So it is DA70D6. And then we're going to put in a background image. And that image, you can see here, you can actually select image, linear gradient, or radial gradient. We're going to grab the radial gradient in parentheses. We're going to say 2. And so you can also do degrees, or you can put in multiple colors here to have a linear gradient. But we're going to say 2 space bottom. So the color is going to go from the top to the bottom. And it's going to start with a white. So we're going to start with F, and it is going to continue with that DA number that we have here. So I'm just going to copy that real quick and paste that. And then we are going to say background no repeat, because we don't want this to repeat throughout the thing. So then we're going to put in background repeat, no repeat. So not inside the parentheses, sorry. Outside the parentheses, you should have that. And then I'm going to have the background repeat. No repeat. And if we look at our gradient now, it will show you that it is white from the top, and to the bottom it will go to that color. The reason it fills the box, this color is the background color across the whole body, but this fills the box that we're using. So that is the linear gradient. You can change that to a radial gradient, and I put in those 2 colors again. It will radiate out. So I'm going to start with this color. And I'm going to go white. And I will close that. And if you noticed as I roll over it, yeah, let's just look at it. So now you can actually see the gradient is pink in the center and white on the sides. And because we have the background color is this color, it is going to that. So I would probably have to change this background color to white. And that is gradients in a quick nutshell. I am going to click somewhere else here. And now you can actually see how it's going to gradate out here. As I make this bigger, you can actually see the gradient. It's pink, and then it goes to white. I hope all that makes sense. You can put multiple colors in there. You don't just have to live with one. Play with it. Images with linear gradients and radial gradients are great.